Okay, welcome to week 11, everyone. Workshop 3. We are looking at professional relationships and communication skills. So reflections on your professional experience and beyond into your professional practice. So in your role as a primary school teacher, you're going to need to coordinate, delegate, and also liaise with a variety of people. So this will involve having effective working relationships from people of different ages, backgrounds, status within your work environment, and also cultures as well. So at times this may be a struggle, but it will be made much easier with mindful use of your communication skills. So on the slide, you will see the diverse range of people who you will be involved with in your primary school setting. So everyone from canteen staff, so they're often our wonderful parent volunteers, right up to the principal. So these people and how they interact would have become quite evident to you in your placement. So did anyone have the opportunity to interact with their principal or the deputy? Was that something that you were able to do in your placement?
Yeah, I was, without giving away the school,
Yeah.
the deputy and the principal would freely roam, and I'm now working at the school as an aide, and they're very much on site. They're moving around constantly, and a lovely presence. They don't seem up in some kind of untouchable hierarchy. They're
Okay.
hands on.
Yeah, that's good to hear. So, as discussed earlier, as well as getting on with these people during your placement, it's also important to remember that the school setting that you do your placements in, like your last one and future placements as well, they're potential places of employment, or possibly somewhere that, like you, Emily, you could do some volunteer work or to get some further experience. So anyone other than Emily still keeping in contact with their placement school?
So sometimes last week I sent an email to my supervising teacher. So I think we are getting along well with each other. So sometimes when I find some issues, so I will talk to her. So I think that's good.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
So one of my students last year said that they thought that the admin staff were particularly important people to get to know, because to get to know well and to develop a bit of a relationship with, because they're the ones that know everything that's going on, like what job opportunities are coming up, any vacancies, that sort of thing. So I guess it's really important to make sure you know who's in the know in your schools, because it's very important that you put yourself out there. Okay. So to enable you to work effectively with all of these people, you'll need to have well-developed communication skills, including the ability to work with individuals and also within a team, so with a group. So you need to have really strong interpersonal skills. So as you can see there, communication, interpersonal, and group. So 3 areas that we're going to have a look at in the workshop today. So for some people, these communication skills and those interpersonal skills, they don't really come easily, and they are skills that you may need to work on. So the good news is that, as I said, with mindful reflection of your interpersonal practices, these skills can actually be improved considerably. So they're the kind of skills that, I guess, if people consider you a people person, you're the kind of person that can put people at ease. So make them feel good about themselves and what they have to say. And so skills that shout that you are a people person. And for teachers, these communication skills are pretty much the foundation of our teaching practice. So one of these essential skills that is the basis of all good communication is active listening. So it's important to remember, I like to say that hearing is not the same as listening. So to really listen to a student, to a colleague, or to a parent, we need to be active in the process. So if you're not carefully paying attention to what others are saying, there's no way that you're going to be able to respond effectively. So as a busy teacher, it's really easy to be distracted. So we have to stay on focus with our communication. If you've ever had a conversation with someone and walked away feeling like they really understood you and were genuinely interested in what you had to say, or they actually made you feel good about what you had to say, they were actively listening. And this is a real skill. So on the slide, I've got 5 specific skills that you'll be aware of, but a lot of us, we're not conscious of them or we don't think about them in our interactions. So being conscious of them is the key. So the first one, they seem fairly self-explanatory, but the first one, eye contact, this should convey sensitivity to the needs of the person who's speaking and also express genuine interest and concern. So your voice, it should also convey this interest. So you might be using verbal encouragers such as yes, aha, or all right, things like that. And of course, nodding to let them know that you're listening. Your body language as well, it needs to convey that you're open and that you're also relaxed. You need to avoid fidgeting or folding of your arms. I am a shocking jiggler, so I have to be very, very careful about this because it is a dead giveaway if I'm a little bit disinterested possibly or even a bit agitated about what I have to talk about. And I also find that my voice quavers a little bit as well if I'm anxious or agitated about something that I need to talk about with someone, something that I'm a bit anxious about. So I really have to keep that in check. So attentive people, they also often lean forward a little bit when they're talking to someone, and this is really effective to show that you're interested. So that open body language. What about in terms of seating? What do you think might be a good, an effective position when you're speaking with someone? Anyone got any ideas? What do you think? What do you find most comfortable when you're talking with someone?
I'd avoid typical date setup, not staring each other down, but it's more like a right angle, not side by side, but picking a corner of the table each. So I'm not making that clear. I'm not communicating very well. That's the gist of what I'm trying to say.
But definitely not across the table. I think that's something that needs to be avoided at all costs. But yeah, sitting side by side can actually be quite good, or as you say, sort of at right angles, because it shows that it's less threatening and it says that you're equals. So it's really best to avoid those across the desk situations, especially with parents. So you need to make sure they feel like they're equals in that situation. So verbal tracking, this is something that's really important and it's something that we often overlook, and that's about listening to the language that's being used, the person's emphasis on any key words, staying with the topic of discussion, not changing track, which is easy to do. So interrupting with your own story or something. So if someone says something, you immediately think, oh yeah, that's happened to me. And then you convey your story. What you need to do is make sure that when you're actively listening, that it's all about that person that you're listening to, that you're having that conversation with. Finally, what's the last one that we've got there? Paraphrasing. So listening, it's all about it's not about parroting what you hear, it's about clarification. So, for example, I would use phrases like, it sounds like you're saying that, or from what you've said, I understand. So, paraphrasing, it communicates your understanding and it also encourages the speaker to continue speaking as well. So, you're encouraging them to continue on. And most importantly, it clarifies the meaning to make sure that there's no possibility of miscommunication, which is, um, you certainly don't want that when you're talking to a parent or a colleague or a student as well. Um, I'd like you to actually take a moment to think about these skills, but I'd also like you in the next couple of days to try using them to maybe with your partner or one of your friends, when you're next having a conversation to someone, I want you to really think about how you're talking to them, if you're actively listening. I had in my mentoring beginning teacher workshops, I talk about active listening, and I had their 2-day workshops and I talk about communication on the first day. And I remember one occasion I had a teacher say to me on the second day, Angela, I went home and I did what you said. I practiced the active listening with my husband and I actually had one of the best conversations that I'd had with him for years. And so, it really does work. And we're conscious that we should be actively listening, but because we're so busy, we don't actively listen to the people that we're speaking to. So a bit of homework for you to practice your active listening. So research has said that as little as 10% of our communication takes place verbally. And I find that really hard to believe, but I think it is true, 10%. So that really emphasised the importance of the way we move our bodies. It's part of our culture and our language, and it's all about those non-verbal messages that reinforce the meanings of our words, and they also convey our feelings and also our preferences. So we send and we interpret these signals almost subconsciously. And so with what we communicate non-verbally, often exposing how we really feel in a situation. So if your non-verbal communication skills are poor, you may actually be communicating negatively and making students, parents, or possibly your colleagues uncomfortable, or possibly you might be expressing cues that say you lack confidence or interest in what that person is saying. So it's also important in regards to reading students and parents and our colleagues' body languages. We need to look at what they might be expressing non-verbally, so the messages that we take from others. So it's important that we're very aware of what these messages might be. So to improve your nonverbal skills, you really need to identify areas where you might be lacking. So first up, one of the things that is really important is your posture. So slouching or crossed arms, it really shows that you're not interested in what a person is saying. So sitting up straight, facing others, but slightly forward shows interest, it shows energy, and it shows enthusiasm. Now, I like to use the royal family in these examples because they're actually trained in how they use their body language. Surprisingly, you may not realise that looking at some of their body language, but, especially someone like Meghan Markle, who is, as you know, an actress as well as now a member of the royal family, she is very much aware of her body language and what it's expressing. So your body movement is also very important. For example, swinging your legs backwards and forwards in a meeting, folding your arms, or drumming your fingers on the table. So this tells others that you're impatient, that you're bored, or that you're disinterested. And I love this shot of Barack Obama with his arms folded, because what's that telling us? He's completely disinterested. He's distracted, and the three of them are trying very hard to get his attention, but he doesn't want a part of it. He's completely focused on something else. And that crossing of the arms, that particular body movement, it says, I'm not interested. So facial expressions and eye contact, that's really important. Your face can display a myriad of emotions. I love this one. This is a very famous photo. So you really need to be careful what those facial expressions are showing. So a look of seriousness, for example, when your work is being critiqued by your supervising teacher, for example, or possibly a sympathetic response to someone's expression of difficulties. It can go a long way in conveying your level of engagement with the situation. So making direct eye contact, this provides others with the comfort needed to communicate with you in return. You need to be mindful, though, that your attempts at eye contact, they don't end up in an unrelenting stare. So remember that moderation is the key here, and Joey is a good example of that here. So
Can I add something to the eye contact?
Yeah.
I'm reading the book, The Body Keeps the Score, and it's all on the effects of trauma on the brain. And I just came across this. I didn't completely appreciate that a brain in trauma or post-traumatic stress will actually fire a fight-flight response with direct eye contact. So someone averting your gaze is not out of it, just even so adult eye contact. So it's really something to. I fully am aware now that it's not out of disrespect. It's actually their brain isn't coping.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think in terms of identifying that, you really need to be aware. Like if you are making eye contact with someone and their head's going down and they're looking uncomfortable, you need to step back and rethink, readdress the way you're interacting with that person and what your body language looks like. But that's a really good point, Emily. Thank you. So hand gestures, I guess that's another really important one. So spreading your hands apart in front of you with your palms facing outwards, as you can see on the slide with your palms toward the speaker. This indicates a willingness to communicate and to share ideas. So another thing also is some mirroring of the person that you're speaking with. This can also show that you're interested. So these are really subtle signals, but they really can make an impact in how you're interacting with someone. So finally, I guess the last one is personal space. And I guess this is similar, Emily, to eye contact. You need to be really aware of that. Different cultures view proximity in various ways. So you again need to take notice of the person that you're communicating with. Are they comfortable with this body space? So the amount of physical space between people, it conveys many emotions. So too close can convey anger, and a wide gap, as we can see on the slide, it says, I'm not interested and I don't like you. All these things to think about. So I guess like a tradesperson who uses tools every day in their work, your voice as a teacher is something that you need to practice with. It's important that you know its limitations and also its many applications as well. Did anyone find when they were on their placement that their voice was actually, you got a sore voice? You were talking too much possibly? Yeah. A few students have commented that, yeah, a few honey and lemon drinks were needed in the evenings, because they were, when especially those full days of teaching, they were talking a lot. So you need to be really careful about that. And I guess if you've got a sore voice, it might say that your teaching might be a little bit too teacher directed, and you're not using enough of those verbal encourages and your non-verbal signals as well. It's really important to think about. So the words that we speak, their meaning and your manner of delivery, so your tone, your tempo, your pitch and your volume, they all matter, and they're going to shape the messages you send to students. So it also helps in stimulating their thinking and helping them to frame concepts as well. So the way you emphasize different words, it's really, really important. Marking the podcasts at the moment, it's really interesting to see how different students are using their voice. Some students don't vary their pitch or their tone or tempo at all, or they don't necessarily place emphasis on specific words. So it's really important that you do place emphasis on important words, especially with your student. That's really important. So as it says on the slide, the first point, specific. You need to be specific with your meaning, reinforcing, as we've said before, at the beginning of your lesson, at the end of your lesson. Students, again, they will be tuned in to positive feelings in your tone of voice. So that's really important. And of course, they will also be tuned into negative as well. So that really sets the tone of the classroom, just with your voice, with the way you're using it. So your tone of voice and the sounds that you make, they can really communicate your thoughts to others without you even speaking. So just for example, if during your placement you might have received some directions from your supervising teacher that you weren't so keen about, and you kind of went, ugh, that immediately tells your supervising teacher that you haven't agreed with what they've said. Your tone, the sounds you make, it can inform people of if you're angry, if you're frustrated, or even some particular little sounds can show that you can convey sarcasm and things like that. So it's really important that, again, it's something that you think about, something that you're conscious of. So there are 6 skills on the slide that as a teacher you would definitely need to consider. The first 3, audibility, clarity and precise enunciation, are fairly straightforward. They're self-explanatory, but by variety, I mean variety again in tone and pitch and the emphasis on keywords. When you're next watching the news, I want you to take note of the variety and the emphasis on words that newsreaders use. They're trained in this area. Actually, not that many of us actually watch the news anymore. I read it on my phone, as most people do, I think. But if you do, have a look at the way newsreaders use their voice, because they're trained to use it appropriately. It really does take practice. Correct language, this is essential. So the use of language that's age appropriate, so language that students understand. If you're using any acronyms or keywords, make sure you define them. That's really important. Finally, mannerisms. So use them sparingly. Some of us are very much into expressing ourselves with our hands, which can be good at times, but you need to be careful you're not over the top of that, because it can be a real distraction. So did Pili, Emily or Yuhad, did you actually notice how your supervising teacher might have used any of these areas?
Yeah, in my first lesson that I was teaching science, I wasn't aware of my voice is quite loud.
Mhm.
Then a supervising teacher, end of the day, she said that your voice was quiet, because I used to be in a pastoral center. I used to give the talks, so it big for almost 500 people and so on. Even if there is no microphone, we in India, there is no electricity, there is no power, you need to have a voice. But out of my maybe nervousness or maybe first session, it was quite loud, but I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah.
Then a teacher told you
Yeah.
how talking to only 20 children in the classroom. So next class will be disturbed because of your loud voice, but you have good voice and loud voice, but make sure that communication is only within these 25 students. Then I was aware of it. Then I remind myself, Pili, am I fast? Am I slow? My voice is how is. So I used to keep on reminding myself in my mind. Then it
Yeah.
went on. Yeah, that was the one thing which my supervising teacher corrected me in the first lesson itself.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very important. And I think some students have said to me that the way their teacher spoke during placement, the way they used their voice wasn't really suited to them. So, for example, if your supervising teacher used a really loud voice, as you were saying, or tended to shout quite a lot, and that wasn't what you're used to, you might use a quieter voice and then raise it occasionally. So it's really important that as a teacher, you develop your own style of how you're going to interact and talk to your students and the kind of tone that you're going to use. So it's part of our personality, Pilly. I agree. And it's also part of our previous
One
training.
example is that when there is a behavior problem, I was in Borough State School in Marsden, Kingston side. So there is a lot of behavior problem. Even prep children, they are not on time after their lunch to get into the classroom. So the particular day that my supervising teacher was real, she was so loud enough and she was like almost like swearing set of their voice. The
Okay.
next day, I was given responsibilities to bring them after their lunch to the classroom. Then I stood right in front of the classroom. Then I kept the pin drop silence myself. Then I said, if you are ready, only I will take them. I will take you to the classroom. If you're not ready, I'm not going to take you to the classroom. Then all of them put the pin drop silence, like. So
Yeah.
I use one two sentences. If you're not ready, I am not going to take you into the classroom, but I am ready to get into the classroom, I said. Then
Yeah.
all kept it. Then I thought my way of strategy is to bring them into the classroom is different. Then the supervising teacher said, yeah, you need to find out your own ways to bring it to the classroom.
Yeah. Yeah.
So which I real opposite the behavior
Yeah.
management.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's a learning. You've
Yeah,
learned a lot, yeah, from it. I find that sometimes teachers that have that really quiet voice, they speak very quietly, and the students actually have to listen carefully to hear what they're saying. So I find that their classrooms are actually fairly quiet places. So, there's all sorts of ways of, positively managing a classroom with your voice. So it's something that you really need to think about. Okay, so now we're going to have in terms of relationships, so your second bright module that you needed to complete by the end of this unit. So in week 1, it was outlined that this needs to be completed by the end of the unit, with also the first introductory module as well. If you're unsure about this, anyone who's watching from home, all you need to do is go back to week 1. At the end on Blackboard, on that week 1 page, you just need to click on and enroll. There's a link there. So you really should try and get both of those modules out of the way by the end of this unit. You're not going to be assessed on them, but it's important that you get them out of the way, because next time you're going to have to move on and do module 3 and 4. So has anyone, Emily, Pilly or Yuha, have either of you completed them?
Yes, first model resilience I finished, and the relationship is up the way.
Okay. As I said, you're not going to be marked on them, so it doesn't matter, but I would definitely make sure you enroll while you're in this unit. I think that's really important. But yeah, it's something that you should try and do. I know a lot of you would
Do
have
I
been
need
putting
to
it
do
off.
during the Angela? Do I need
Yeah,
to do only this time, or after the unit? Can we do it in
you can do it
November
after the
after all my
unit. Yeah,
assignments are over? Yeah.
that would be fine.
Okay,
That
that's
would be
fine.
fine. I won't tell anyone, Pilly.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, yeah.
No, that's fine.
No, no.
So
Just I was wondering that we need to give us or sending some link or that we finished. I
no,
thought it.
no,
Oh, no.
no.
Okay,
It's
that is fine. And I
self-monitored,
can take it my time. Yeah.
self-monitored. Yeah, you can
Okay,
take your
fine.
time. And I
Yeah.
know a lot of
Thanks.
you probably wouldn't have got to it because you had your practical experience and then you had your vodcast due. And now, how many assignments have you got?
We have three more. I have three.
Yeah, I
Three.
have 2 more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have
So,
3. Actually, I have 3. One
yeah.
just start from next week, a 5-week lesson.
Yeah, inclusive education. Yeah, that comes in.
Yes, inclusive.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm saying.
Yeah, so
So I
everyone's
have,
busy, so that's fine. But we'll
yeah.
just go through a little bit about what it's about because it does directly relate to this particular workshop. So the first part of the module, it looks at support networks. So as you would have found during your professional experience, having these in place during PECS was really important. So knowing those people around you who you could rely on for support when things are tough, because as we know, it was a stressful time, really busy time in your lives, especially as master's students. A lot of you are working and have families as well, so you really needed to have those support networks. And I stressed that at the prior to PECS, but I think it's really come home to a lot of people now that that was very important. So moving into your next placement, I think again it's something that you really need to look at. So friends and family, university colleagues, so really making sure you make use of your university partner, develop that relationship with them right up front, and send them your goals. Make sure that they remember you, that they know who you are, and keep up with those emails. And if you do have a question, they're the person that you need to contact. So you really do need to make that relationship with them. And then you've also got your professional network. So that may be through the school, it may be the student support group as well through HiQ, and also those social networks that you have with your colleagues as well, the Facebook pages that and links and things, the forums that you are in, and also your professional learning community groups as well. So it's really important that you do have those support networks in place, so you've got people to lean on, to fall back on. So I guess it's also about constantly maintaining those support networks as well. So even when you're not on placement, to keep in contact with each other, to make sure that you do know what sort of university services are available for you. So the counselling service, as I've said, they're wonderful people, and it's a free service and they're there to help you. And student support as well, whether it be literacy or with all sorts of areas, as you would have seen with your Landtite test as well. So the student support services have lots of facilities, lots of people there to help you, either one-on-one or as a group as well. So yeah, really important that you know about those and you maintain those support networks. So the second part of the module was all about building new relationships. So from your experiences during professional experience, you would be well aware of the importance of building a trusting relationship with your supervising teacher. So you would also hopefully had the opportunity to interact with some of the other staff in your learning environment as well. In some of the internal workshops that we did for this week, we had lots of discussions about what happens in a staff room. We're going to get onto that a little bit later, but every school is different and it really does depend on the culture of the school as to what happens in the staff room. So we'll get back to that a little bit later. But I'd like you to have a think about what you might do differently in your next placement in regards to working and developing that relationship with your supervising teacher. So Pilly, Emily, or Yuha, do you feel like you developed that relationship with your supervising teacher, that working relationship, a trusting relationship early enough?
Sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think sort of, and so even now I have some questions when I doing my assignment for science or for some other subjects, yeah, especially for teaching plan or maths as well. If I have some problems, so the first thing, first person for me that I can think about, I can tend to help is my supervising teacher. So
Okay.
yeah, so I contacted her via email and sometimes text her. So I think that's good. Although she looked very serious at the very beginning, and she was also very very strict. But I think that's really good.
You developed a relationship afterwards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think something that a lot of students coming back from their first placement, they did realize that, that first week, it was very important. As I emphasized, that in that lead-in day, you really needed to make sure you had a good idea about expectations, that it was clarified with your supervising teachers. So you both broke down the progression table, you talked about what the expectations were, and also you talked about things like how you were going to communicate, when you would communicate. Would it be via email, or would it possibly be one-to-one before school or after school? So moving into your next placement, I think it's very, very important that you think about establishing that sooner rather than later. Very
Yes.
important.
That is true. First week of prac, it was more of time of building up a trust in each other. So we had introduction each other, sharing about our own backgrounds, family, and what may she expressed what her desire to become a teacher. Then
Yeah.
what was my previous work experience, and we were open, just shared our cultural backgrounds, some of the both good things as well as some of the negative aspects of the cultures, and that made both of us to build trust. And
Yeah.
every day after the school, we had almost half an hour to 45 minutes every day supervision, which
Good.
is we agreed together. And
That's
every
fantastic.
practically every day. And Friday, her husband comes to pick up fast, so Friday we didn't have, but other 4 days we had.
Yeah.
And it built up as really good relationship. At the
That's
end of my
fantastic.
last prac, even it made a desire for me to make a cake for whole class, and I made a cake and get distributed to the kids.
That's great.
So
No,
really, we built a good relationship here.
that's
So that,
great, Philip.
yeah.
Really good.
Yes.
So I guess I get that is a nice segue into building relationships with your colleagues as well. So from your experience, in your professional experience, you would have been well aware of the importance of building a trusting relationship, not just with your supervising teacher, but also with your colleagues, because as a practicing teacher, they're going to be your support system. You're going to work with them. You're going to brainstorm ideas. You're going to share perspectives and work together to create, a culture that is a really pleasant place to work in. So it's really important that you get involved in your school community. Did any of you notice if your supervising teacher was involved in any activities in the school, social activities with other colleagues?
My teacher was admittedly had been on every committee known to teaching staff and had pulled herself out of several and had this cute thing of fear of missing out when she knew there was a meeting that she used to be a part of.
Okay.
So I went to the ones that she was still involved in, and she would often duck off for a coffee or a morning tea with a colleague that had recently achieved something or a birthday. Or, very connected in.
That's great. That culture is so important, and especially for beginning teachers as well, to become part of that culture. You know, on the slide, there's a picture of a netball team. There's often sporting teams and things at schools. A friend of mine is the captain of their school volleyball team. So it's really important. It's a great way to meet and work with staff and get to know them. There's also opportunities in schools, in primary schools, to be involved with students in sports clubs, music ensembles, drama productions, musicals, all sorts of things that you can get involved in to a more, a way of immersing yourself in the school culture. And it's also a way to show your commitment to your students and to the school as well. Some schools, they have social clubs for staff, so opportunities to build professional and personal relationships as well. At my last mentoring beginning teacher workshop, the teachers were referring to their choir practice. And I said, that's fantastic that you've got a choir at the school, but it was actually code for after school drinks. So yeah, I guess depending where you're going, there could be a bit of that as well. All right, so as I said before, in the internal workshops, we're talking quite a bit about staff room interactions because, they can be a really wonderful place for teachers to debrief and to support each other. So staff room conversations, they can build rapport with your colleagues, and they can lead to new ideas and also new perspectives, help each other to solve problems. But from what some students said, that they observed that they can also be a place of gossip and quite a bit of negative talk as well. Did Emily or Yuha, did either of you experience anything like that? Was it a nice staff room culture, or did possibly you never went to the staff room?
No, I had a few really lovely chats because we had teachers' aides in there. To get their perspective, and then I got talking to another teacher, and it was all positive. I got just so curious about everyone's backgrounds and how they got to where they were, and I felt like the vibe was supportive and uplifting. It wasn't
that's great. That's great.
They say bitching for somewhere else.
No, that's fantastic. Yeah. It's so important to be respectful and to avoid gossip and negative talk at all costs. And you really need to be mindful of confidentiality. So around personal information with parents, but also with colleagues as well. Got to be very careful about that. So the tone of your staff room was quite a positive one, Emily. What about you, Yuha?
So I seldom went to staff room because every time, so my supervisor had never been to the staff room during lunchtime or morning tea break. Yeah, so just stayed in the classroom. So maybe that's the reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of students were saying that their supervising teachers had fridges in their staff rooms, so they didn't, in their classrooms, so they didn't need to actually go to the staff room and their lunch and everything, which I got to say is a little bit sad. My memories of teaching in a school environment, where a lot of the good times I remember were based in the staff room, that collaborative sort of working together and chatting, and just the social thing, that it really does make a difference to your work day when you have someone that you can share with. So another area that is really important, and this is something that came straight out of my research on professional identity for teachers transitioning from graduate to practicing teachers, mentoring. It was so important. As it says, elevates teaching standards, improves students' outcomes, builds professional excellence in teaching, and boosts school autonomy. It's really important. And one of the most important things that I found out of my research was that it helps with retention too. And that first year is when we tend to lose a lot of our teachers, and a lot of our good teachers as well, because in the past they just didn't have that support. There wasn't efficient induction, and there certainly wasn't sufficient support for teachers. In a lot of ways, they were left to sink or swim. So now we've got really good induction processes, compulsory induction processes in all schools. And we've also got mentoring in Queensland, as I've said before. So as a beginning teacher moving into a Queensland school, you would have access to a mentor, hopefully one trained through the Mentor and Beginning Teacher workshops, because we've trained well over 3,000 teachers now. So these are teachers that will be able to mentor you in that first year leading into your full registration. If you are teaching rural and remote, you will still have a mentor. If there is no one to mentor you face-to-face, you will have an online mentor. So we're also training mentors to mentor through Zoom and phone conversations as well. So working in with a mentor in a professional partnership, it really does have benefits and can provide excellent opportunities if you can meet regularly face-to-face. So with that mentoring, the Mentor and Beginning Teacher program, there's actually funding there to supply relief teachers for you to move out of your classrooms and to meet with your mentor within school time. So it's not actually outside of school time. You also might want to seek an outside mentor as well. So if you know a retired teacher or an academic or of some sort, it's really good to access them as well. So someone outside of your school. And you can also access them through your professional associations as well, which hopefully you'll be thinking about becoming a member of. So we've already gone through this one fairly, some of the important lessons you learnt about working with your supervising teacher. I think we mentioned some of those, but those of you at home, I want you to really think about how you might, from your reflection on this, what might you take into your next professional experience in terms of working with your supervising teacher and building that relationship. Something else that I really want everyone to think about is what, we've talked about communication skills, but I want you to be really honest with yourself and really think about, are you a confident communicator? Is it something that you need to work on? How does your individual personality hinder or help you? Because if you're not the kind of person that is willing to put themselves out there, that can have a bit of an impact on your working life as a teacher and as a student as well. I've been hearing stories of students in their professional experience doing things like knocking on the door of the neighbouring classroom, introducing themselves and asking the teacher if they could observe. So you need to put yourself out there and challenge yourself, if you are a little bit introverted, to try and, become an active member in that school environment, that school culture. Another area that is really important is building relationships with parents. Emily, Yuha and Pili, what did you do in terms of building relationships with parents during your professional experience? Were there any particular strategies that you used?
We had our school had the no parent access, the gates at the bottom, because it was a maybe 2-story building. 3 stories somewhere. So they'd have that know between 2:45 and 3 o'clock, no parents. But we had a few children whose parents would break those rules because their child needed a bit of extra time transitioning to class. So they were probably the relationships I built, were ensuring that parent that I had the child's best interests at heart. And when I would see the parent-teacher interviews, if I was there of a morning when they were being conducted, I'd be introduced to them. But yeah, it's a very delicate dance of being the student teacher, and it's that this is who I am and this is my role, and I felt like I wanted to explain why I was there and that I was a confidential set of ears for what was being discussed. But yeah, there wasn't drop-offs and pick-ups so much where I didn't meet them like I do at my son's school, where the teacher's very front and centre. That was my experience.
I had no chance to meet any parents. Yeah, so maybe I was a place that in year 6, so only students came into the classroom and left. Yeah, so I had no chance to meet any parents during my professional experience.
Well, since it was a prep, I had an opportunity every day after the school. Parents come right in front of the classroom to pick up their children. So I had a chance most of the times to talk to the parents, and I introduced myself. I am here for 3 weeks for my prac. And some of the parents build up a relation, and last day of my prac, even they were wishing all the best for rest of your studies and so on. But some of the parents, even they shared about their family situation, family problems. Of course, I kept the confidentiality, all the stuff. Yeah.
Yes, it's I guess depending on the age, like the preps, obviously you're going to have more opportunity, as you did, Pilly, to interact. But as you're getting up, like with Yuha, the year 6 environment, teachers really need to work hard to try and communicate with parents. More and more now, where there are apps that teachers use to communicate with parents in terms of assessment, what's happening in the classroom. But still, there is nothing wrong with a phone call. I'm a big, very important to, if you wanted to phone a parent to tell them how a child is progressing, whether it be something that they've achieved or something that they're having issues with, I really think it's important to pick up the phone the old-fashioned way. What if a parent is reluctant to communicate? What sort of strategies could you use to encourage them to engage in the classroom? Any ideas?
I know as a parent myself that the class rep sends emails around suggesting days that they need help with reading groups, or offering, they do after school picnics at least once a fortnight. I think it comes back to building connections, and then if there's, I love to garden, and my background's in health and nutrition. So if it's suggested that that's what they need in the classroom, I'm more likely to engage. But yeah. The email has, so the contact's been made and I've built the relationship with the class rep at drop off. So yeah, probably back to relationship building and creating an area where parents feel like they want to join in and they've got something of value.
Yeah. So I guess it's about giving parents the opportunity as well, like putting out newsletters or emails, inviting parents to share their ideas, possibly. So very important right from the very beginning as a practicing teacher that we really establish those strong relationships, and not just in prep. It's very important in early childhood, but all the way through, and even moving into high school as well. We still need to maintain those strong relationships with parents, and often those parents that are reluctant to, you really need to put in an extra effort, and you may need to try lots of different strategies until you find one that really works well. Another area that is really important is partnerships with the local community. So student connections with their community, ownership, participation, things like volunteering for a cause, developing empathy for others, making sure that the curriculum is connected to real world experiences. So the local industry, trade, culture, traditions, you know, making sure that students have a voice in their community, possibly as they're getting a bit older. Some of the images on the slide that you can see, you know, Clean Up Australia Day, those kind of things. Lots and lots of environmental organisations to participate in, and things that you can do with your students. But as actually cross-generational learning is one there that's very typical, topical at the moment. I think there's an ABC documentary at the moment. Has anyone, I haven't watched it, I've seen the shorts for it with children going into aged care homes and interacting with the residents. Yeah, I've been meaning to have a look at that. So yeah, all sorts of things that you can do, but and it's not just rural and remote communities, it's metropolitan as well. We really need to make sure students have that connection, that they can see that it takes collaboration to design and develop solutions to local problems. It's something that is important. We also have, I think in my son's school, they had an opportunity to go to Malaysia, I think it was in year 11, and I think they were helping to build a community hall or something. So, you know, really working towards some quite extraordinary opportunities for students. So I'm not sure if Emily, Yuha or Pili, if any of you are interested in doing rural, but I guess that's something, if those students who are watching the recording, if you are thinking about doing a rural or remote placement, it's really important that you think about how you're going to become part of that community. You know, you really need to make sure that, you know, you make those connections as well. But I guess it's not, as teachers, I guess you need to identify potential community partnerships and strategies to foster the student participation that we were talking about. So it's not just rural and remote, it's again, it's metropolitan as well, because the learning that occurs within that local community, it's really important. And even though it is very relevant for you to think about if you are going rural and remote, it's still something that you need to reflect on in terms of metropolitan. Okay, so what about relationships with your students? Let's just consolidate some of our experience, because we have talked about them in the past, but I guess it's about developing trust and an environment where students feel confident that they can share their perspectives, that they feel safe, that they can challenge themselves. So how did this go in your placement? Were there any really important lessons that you learnt about developing these relationships with children? Anything?
I'd like to touch on one of your tutes. There was one of the students mentioned her teacher had advised against getting really close to the students. And I've thought that over since then, because my teacher had the philosophy that you quickly develop relationships with them, and then that fosters that connection which encourages trust and learning. So with my students, I went with that template, and it was more parallel conversation in the transition times, or we went up to watch a concert and we all walked back together, and I made an active point of just engaging in a conversation around what their interests were and their perspective and building it from there.
Right.
But I would really struggled if there was a please don't engage too closely with them, because my core values is connection and then trust and as a mum, I reflected on that a lot actually, and was grateful that I could build the relationships the way I did to then foster the connection, which is, I still go back to the school and get greeted by them running across the playground, which is really special. I think
That is.
it's a positive experience.
I think it's a really good point, Emily, because a lot of it has to do with our personality, doesn't it? You know, how we interact, and also our philosophy of teaching, which you're all going to be starting to think about now. So the emphasis on relationships, you know, some people may not be that way inclined, that maybe they do want to keep that distance, and a lot of people do believe that that's important in terms of classroom management, not to get too close to your students. So again, it's a personal choice, and it's something that we need to start thinking about moving into our second placement, your second placement, right? So one of the things that I was talking to some internal students about is how you introduced yourself to the students. Did anyone actually get the opportunity to introduce themselves personally, or was it the supervising teacher that introduced you?
And my supervising teacher introduced me to the students just in several sentences, just a few sentences, yeah. So, and after that, she asked me to introduce myself, or to say something more about myself. And so I think her attitude, or what should I say? So she, when she introduced me, and she looked very serious, yeah. So I intended to do something fun to introduce myself, and then at that time, so just stopped. Yeah. So just introduce what I'm going to stay with them for the next 5 weeks, and where I need them help because I'm new to the school and something like that. So I didn't do anything fun.
So what would you do differently in your next professional experience? How could you overcome that? What do you think you might be able to do?
Yeah, so I'm thinking of maybe I will use some icebreaker activities to get the student to know about me.
Excellent. So possibly you might need to use your initiative, and prior to your lead-in day, maybe you could do up a plan and email it to your
Yeah.
supervising teacher and say, is there an opportunity for me to you know, introduce
Yeah.
myself? I've got this idea. What do you think that might say to your supervising teacher?
Wow, that's really good. Yeah, so I've never thought about that. Thank you.
So that would say that you're, you know, you're using your initiative, you're motivated, you're organized, and that's really going to set, you know, set yourself up with your supervising teacher as well. Of course, it would all be in the way that you discussed it. You don't want to be too pushy, but it's always good to say, is there an opportunity, or I'd like to do this. Would there be a possibility? Those sorts of phrases. Anyone else have the opportunity to introduce themselves using something
first day of my day in the school, my supervising teacher was sick, so she didn't turn up on that day. And the relief teacher was also first time coming to that particular classroom. So we both were new to the classroom. So we both had to introduce ourselves. So I had introduced myself asking them, have you known about India? Asking my cultural background. And children raised their hands, asking how many of them know India. Then they said, oh, it is India is a country, like that prep they started saying. Then I said, I come from originally from India. So like that I started, it took almost 7 minutes for me introducing myself to them.
Oh, well, that's great. That's a great opportunity.
Yeah.
So I guess if your supervising teacher wasn't there, you wouldn't have had that opportunity if they were there.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And my relief teacher was coming from a Filipino background. So she also introduced about herself and coming from Filipino background.
Excellent. Very good.
So it was fun introduction. Yep.
Okay, well, so again, something that you can reflect on and what you might do differently next time moving into your second professional experience, because you're all very confident now. You know what's happening, you know what to expect, so you can plan ahead a bit. And I think you need to really take advantage of that and make the most, as I said, of that lead-in day. Okay, now we've got our very last activity that we're going to do. Can you see that full slide there? Yeah. So,
I can move my video. Sorry, ignore me.
yeah. So the case study, I'll give you a moment to have a read of it. Those of you at home can do the same.
Does it go across 2 slides, Ange?
No, can you not see the bottom?
No, it's got, what's the point in that? I send you to school.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the
So it
place where I
says,
can see.
what's the point of that? I send you to school to learn. When it comes to eating, I'll decide what to feed you. So basically, the parent is quite confrontational in the activity that the teacher is doing. So what steps would you take? What do you think you'd do in terms of, you know, would you talk to the parent? Would you actually, what would you do?
If I'd overheard it, I wouldn't directly address the parent, not at all trying to be confrontational. If the parent stayed around and inspired a conversation around it or wanted to speak to me, absolutely, I would engage with it. But I would, if it just was an overheard comment and then the next day in the class, I would probably address it with that it's just in a positive light about what we're up to, and that we don't expect the parents to be, anyone at home going through any extra effort, just lightening the load that the children are taking home. Because when my kids rock up with this grand plan from one of their teachers, I often wince and think, oh my gosh, do I have to do that? But it's going delicately with, just a carrot or just some strawberries, and just keeping it more in alignment with the actual idea that we're helping them concentrate with the food, not.
I always find that if parents are sort of confrontational about something like that, it's always good to reflect it back to, like, say, oh, it's part of our healthy food initiative, the school healthy food plan. So, and then do you have any ideas about what we could do? What would you have done retrospectively, thinking, about this situation? How could you have avoided this happening?
Maybe first send an email to all the parents, informing them of your plan on the current program about that.
Yeah. No, excellent. Yeah. So outlining that, as part of the healthy food initiative at school, to educate students about it. This is what we're doing, or we're planning to do something. Do you have any ideas? Would you like to contribute? So I guess, like when we're encouraging students to develop expectations for a positive learning environment so that they have ownership of them, we can also encourage parents to have some autonomy by being part of that decision-making process. So it's actually coming from them. And, if parents don't want to get involved, if they don't want to share their ideas, then, you have given them that opportunity to do that. So it's really important. And, a lot of parents have great ideas, and you never know, you might have, a nutritionalist in the as a parent, or someone that can really assist, or you know, parents who might want to contribute to a recipe book, for example, or something like that. So some really, it's important to get them involved. Any other thoughts about that? Nope. Okay. So that's pretty much the end of our workshop for this week. But next week for workshop 2, for our external, we're going to be doing teaching in diverse contexts, and this will actually lead into the internal workshop on Wednesday at 5 to 7 p.m. and any external students are more than welcome to come and attend that if you have the opportunity to do that. But I am going to make sure it's recorded. So it will only be an audio recording, unfortunately, but it will be a workshop around teaching rural and remote, and it's actually being facilitated by Teach Queensland. So there'll be a panel there, and there'll the opportunity to ask questions if you really are interested in rural and remote. But also, if you do have any questions about teaching locally, there is an opportunity for you to ask questions there as well in terms of employment prospects and how you might go about that. So as I said, if you are available, you're more than welcome to come in on Wednesday 5 to 7 p.m. N515. That's you'll be able to see where it is on the unit overview for that particular week. Okay, any questions before we finish up?
Angela, and next Thursday night, do we still have a workshop?
You certainly do. Yep. So
okay,
that's
good.
workshop 2, teaching in diverse contexts.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you to everyone at home. And if you do have any questions while you're watching this, please do not hesitate to email me and I will do my best to answer them. And we were having a little chat about podcasts before. Those of you that are wondering about when the grades will be released, we've still got a couple of more, at least a week of marking. I think there are, you know, nearly 200 assignments to mark, so it's a really big undertaking. But I think I'm up to M in primary, and then I'm going to go into mark some of the secondary for Grace as well, because there are lots of secondary students. Okay, so thank you very much, and goodbye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good